I enjoy reading manga. It's a lot more fun to read my picture books than to actually sit down and read a novel, at least in English. And since I needed more Japanese practice, a lot more practice, I figured I should start reading more in Japanese. I used to read more a couple years ago, and I was actually getting to a pretty decent level where I was able to understand most things. However, I took a break for quite a long time, so my brain has been drained of most of the necessary information that I acquired back then. And I found I'm significantly less literate than before, which made me think maybe this isn't the best time to get back into reading since I'm only like 2 weeks back to actually fully studying. However, then I thought of this.
千里之行，始于足下.
Those are the exact words that came to my mind. I did want to read novels, to be fancy I guess. I don't really know why I wanted to read novels. I've never had an interest in reading novels in English. However, they're currently too difficult anyway, and they don't have pictures. So now I'm reading manga. But starting to read manga in Japanese again, I had to think, what would have casual, normal conversations that would actually help me learn something useful? And for that, I chose Kanojo okarishimasu, or Rent a Girlfriend, which is undeniably peak. I genuinely thought this would be good to read. However, Kazuya apparently needs to talk about majoring in business administration on the very first page, which was a little bit confusing. However, getting into the more natural parts, it becomes a lot easier to understand. And less confusion means you actually have more context clues, and that way you don't have to pick up a dictionary every 3 seconds. This is not me recommending Rent a Girlfriend though. That's the 4th page of the manga. I did not need a dictionary here, and I don't know if I should be proud of that or ashamed. Also, I would like to state my amazement here that people can actually read kanji like this with 4 pixels. I don't know how you do it, and even for a native Japanese speaker, I feel like that would be really hard to do. I used MangaOCR for automation purposes for making flashcards. However, at certain points I did need to use it to actually read, because some of these kanjis do just look like black blobs to me. Somehow though, Google Lens is able to pick them up, so maybe it's just a me problem. I'm not going to give numbers here or anything, I am just going to talk about my biased view, but I would like to think that it is pretty objective, hopefully. And the first thing you're probably thinking of is, would I do it again at my current level? Yes, I would probably read a couple more volumes, and I probably will read a couple more volumes of Rent a Girlfriend. It's just such a good manga, I can't stop reading it. I'm not sure if I'm going to stick with it past 2 or 3 volumes, however I do have 2 ideas, and both of them sound like they could be correct to me. I suppose both can be right at the same time. My first thought is going to a new manga would be good, because I would learn some new words obviously. However, option 2. Staying with the same manga for a long period of time. The idea here is that if you stick with the same series, it should have a specific theme or vocabulary during it, and that way as you get further into the series, you will know a lot more of the words and won't be looking things up as much. That's all speculation though, I'm not a linguist. However, there are some obvious examples. For instance, if I switch to reading One Piece, I'm obviously going to learn more about boats in the sea, which I would never learn in Rent a Girlfriend. At least so far, I have not seen Kazuya sailing the 7 seas. And as I said before, I would do this again. It's nice to differ how you study and what you study, and it's not just for fun either. Sadly though, no matter how much you like something, Anki cards will ruin everything. I'm kind of joking here, I have most of it automated, but it still is annoying, it breaks up the flow. And I felt like since I was looking up so many words here, I was obligated to actually make an Anki deck for it. But it really does ruin the pacing, especially when I'm trying to play a video game or something, and I have to make Anki cards constantly. And this is the first time I've actually automated making the Anki cards, so the other times it's completely manual and it just destroys the flow. Speaking of flow though, I was very lucky that Rent a Girlfriend has furigana the entire way through. That saved me a ton of time and really kept the flow going, though some of the times it was barely even legible. At the level I'm reading at, reading without furigana would not only be painful, but I do think it would just be detrimental. Sometimes I don't remember the reading of the kanji, but I remember what it means, so I don't look it up, and then I just assign a random reading to it, and it really makes it a bad habit. I've actually gotten these stuck in my head before, and it's really messed me up. But with furigana, I don't have to worry about that, and it makes looking up the more complex kanji a lot easier. Instances like this make it really annoying to look up kanji. Sometimes the dictionary just does not understand what I'm trying to draw, and sometimes I think it's because I write it in the wrong stroke order, and others I do it perfectly and it just doesn't work. Aside from furigana though, something that would really help with the flow is having typed text. I think most mangas unfortunately do this, Rent a Girlfriend being one of them. They have some like handwritten text, I'm assuming drawn by the author. I'm sure more literate people don't even bat an eye at this and they can immediately just know what it says. But some of these I could just not even understand what was going on at all. Like Suki here. I had no clue what to search, I could not tell it was anything remotely similar to that. And once you see it afterwards, you can kind of see, oh, they just shifted one thing over a little bit. But as you're doing it without the reference there, it's so hard to see. Also, how I mentioned furigana is so nice. For some reason on the handwritten parts, they just don't include it. They put the furigana on everything except that. You would think this is some secret the author would be gatekeeping from foreigners or something, but then when you find out what it actually says, it's either something super basic or really important to the story. This is some integral canon dialogue here, and for some reason they do it. If this didn't happen, none of the manga even would have occurred, and this specifically is handwritten. I'll get better at it over time, I know, but it's still annoying. Overall, I think reading this volume took me a few hours. I don't exactly remember how long, but it felt like a very long time. I think most of that is because I read each page 3 times. I do the first read of the page without looking anything up, the second while looking things up with the dictionary, and the third is after I've seen the definition for each word that I was struggling with. I think reading this way actually helps a lot. The first read you get some practice with context clues and it strains your memory a bit since you aren't able to look anything up, which I think helps strengthen words you may know but are having trouble with remembering. The second time obviously just helps you learn the words you didn't know. This method is obviously good because you read it 3 times, which means 3 times the amount of practice. But I also think each step has its own unique benefit. I'm sure I saw this method somewhere at some point, but I can't remember from who or where I saw it, so thank you to whoever showed or told me that. It was probably some GigaChad polyglot. Grammar is very different to vocabulary, for me at least. I've always been really bad at grammar for some reason. That's probably because I neglect it and only put 5% of my effort into it while putting 95% into vocabulary. But the point is, I struggled with a lot of really basic grammar points here that I see all the time. I just don't make the effort of bothering to either write them down or turn them into a flashcard or just study them a little bit. So if you're one of those people that neglected it like I did, please start working on it before it gets out of hand. I did find Boonpro, which I think is helping me with grammar a lot. I'm just learning 6 new grammar points a day, and I think I can learn it pretty fast because I have a lot of exposure to them. So far what I found after reading the manga is that Boonpro actually works pretty good, and I think it's helping me a lot actually. Having the 19 paragraphs that Boonpro gives me of all the nuances actually helps. I have a lot of exposure to this stuff, but like I said, I never bothered to look it up, so I have a general idea of where they go and what it should sound like. However, I just don't have the base I need to actually put them into use, or recognize the nuance that they have in a sentence. But I am picking it up much quicker than I thought I would. So from what I always saw, people said, don't do grammar, you'll get it from just immersing. And I think I completely misunderstood what they were trying to say. I'm pretty sure they weren't saying completely ignore grammar. I think what they were saying is don't get too focused on it, and just learn the basics of a certain grammar point, and then eventually with enough immersion you'll actually get it. However, I never got the basic part because I just never looked them up really, and I completely just ignored them. So yeah, immersion I think is the key, but you also need a little bit added on to immersion, because just looking at something that means nothing to you 100 times isn't going to help. It's just going to be 100 times of looking at nothing. But yeah, grabbing the concept of a sentence should be a lot easier for me after I learned some good grammar points. And learning grammar should obviously make reading a lot more enjoyable, because even if I don't know a word or two, I should be able to see how they connect, and then I could use my context clues a lot better to figure out what it could mean. So I'm not saying I'm going to go to 50-50 grammar and vocab, but I will probably go to 30% grammar and 70% vocab, instead of doing 95-5. I think splitting them a little bit more evenly would work a lot better. And I am certain that switching this up will help, I just don't really know how much it will help. Automation. This saved me a lot of time, as automation usually does with anything. I only used 3 things for the automation process, one of them being optional. There's probably a lot better of a way to do the automation than this. However, I found this first and it worked well enough that I didn't feel the need to switch. I first got ShareX. This is the optional one. It's basically a snipping tool, except it allows you to automatically copy stuff to the clipboard. So if you don't want to download an extra app, you can just use snipping tool since it does come with every Windows computer, I believe. But then you are going to have to do 2 extra clicks, which I was not going to do, so I had to get the extra app. The next is MangaOCR. It's basically just text recognition, and it works with Japanese text. And after you take a screenshot with either snipping tool or ShareX and it gets copied to your clipboard, MangaOCR will automatically grab any image on your clipboard and pull the text off of it immediately, and then it'll replace it with actual text that you can copy and paste into a dictionary. So all you have to do is take 1 screenshot and then just paste your word into a dictionary. At that point, I normally just put it into G-Show and then I read the word myself. Then Yomitan, rest in peace Yomi-chan, will automatically put it into Anki for me with just 1 click. But yeah, that's it for my manga adventure. I learned a good bit from doing this, and I don't mean just learning words. I mean this gave me a good idea on what areas I need to actually improve on. And if you want to figure out what you actually need to work on, I think doing something out of your skill level or out of your comfort zone will help you identify that problem really easily. So yeah, I hope you can also take something away from this video as I did. I do hope I got all of my ideas across well, as I do think they're important and I do want to share them. Even though they may sound basic to someone that's a little bit more advanced or did other languages in school, but after a lot of time of self-studying, I've picked up many habits, some good, some bad, but I do think they're all fixable. That's it though. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe. Bye bye. Matane.